I see you found our little hiding spot in the universe. Don't get too comfortable. This is a place where you will find those with an experience that's out of this world, or possibly deep within your life. I welcome you to the Oracles with James Tyson. Lean forward and listen. We will pull you into a supernatural journey with guests from around the world, each one experiencing some of the most extraordinary phenomena this wee planet has to offer. Now, here are the Oracles with James Tyson.
Thank you, Liam, and thank you, listener, for tuning in to today's episode of the Oracles. It's me, James Tyson. And today joining me is my friend Debi Chestnut. If you want to follow along on her website, it is author DebiChestnut.com. Again, author DebiChestnut.com. Debi is spelled D-E-B-I to differentiate herself from the many other Debi Chestnuts out there. But the author Debi Chestnut is who I've got coming in today to have a chat about her experiences as a medium and growing up intuitive and actually hanging out with dead people as a child. Yeah, I've seen dead people when I was a kid, but I never played with them. I was the kid, the big tough boy who covered his head with a pillow and went back to sleep as best I could. Nope, Debi got up and played games with them, and I was her best friend growing up. So we talk a bit about her experiences as a child and what got her into later becoming somebody interested in investigating paranormal. She's been in the para community for a long time. She was a paralegal before quitting that and becoming a writer full time. We are going to be talking about and kind of touching on a number of her books. The one that I brought her in to talk about originally is called Is Your House Haunted? The second edition, which touches on different ways of obviously determining if your house is really haunted or, you have squirrels in the attic or squirrels in your attic. And we briefly touch on that. We get into another book of hers, How to Clear Your House, How to Clear Your Home of Ghosts and Spirits. And while talking about that, we actually touch on something very negative that happened in an experience as an paranormal investigator and trying to clear something out of a house, running into a demonic entity that she covers in her book, Something Wicked. Another one of her books is Stalking Shadows, a paranormal investigator and a medium, which, and if you know me, you don't want to go, I really don't go on a paranormal investigation without a medium, a real medium, somebody who can actually communicate. So you go into a 100-room building and walking around with a EMF detector and a tape recorder in every one of those 100 rooms until you find the one that's haunted. Take the medium with you so they can go actually to room 104 and figure out what the heck is going on, what is knocking and banging and screaming at the night. Well, this is the type of stuff that Debi does, and she writes about it. So fascinating. We touch on clearing houses. We touch on her experience with dead people growing up and still dealing with the dead. We talk about haunted items, a haunted painting that hangs over her bed. Stories we're going to touch on is a gentleman trapped inside of a mirror that she cleared and crossing people over, and our experiences in crossing people over and the reasons for that. Again, Debi Chestnut, her website, author DebiChestnut.com, or if you're interested in looking up her paranormal books, and these are nonfiction books. She also writes fiction, but we're going to be talking to her about her nonfiction books based on her paranormal experience and her experience growing up seeing dead people for her entire life. We're bouncing down to the shores of Lake St. Clair in Michigan on this cool October afternoon, and I'm going to poke around the corner and see if Debi's ready to come on. Debi, how are you today?
I'm great. How are you doing?
I am well on a drizzly October afternoon or morning. Day here in the Pacific Northwest. And how's Michigan?
Michigan is sunny, a little cool. Not bad.
Yeah,
not bad.
The leaves are turning, and
the leaves have turned. Most of them have. Some of the trees are already bare. The not much boating activity on the lake, so we're good.
Oh, how close are you to the lake?
Lake St. Clair is right across the street, and I have a canal in my backyard.
Oh, lovely. So you've got, and we'll get into a little bit about this, but you've got energy flowing all around.
Everywhere.
Yes. And one of the things obviously I got a hold of you because you are a paranormal nonfiction author. Which
yes.
and have a number of books,
Yes.
all of which I am overly interested in, and
Thank you.
So I will be grabbing a few of these the ones that we're going to be talking about. But I didn't know, and in our little pre-interview conversation here, you are intuitive too. So we'll get into how things like that and energy, and which is probably where I've almost answered the question for myself, but how you got into writing about dead people and hauntings.
Well,
when did that kind of pop up in you? When did you start feeling things?
Oh, I was born with it. My first best friend was a ghost.
Really?
Yeah, named Nathaniel. He was in my great aunt's house, and he was born in the middle 1800s. He had some mental challenges, and at that time they kept them secluded. So when his house was torn down to build a gas station 4 houses down from where he was, he moved into the second floor of my great aunt's house. And no one used the second floor. It was basically for storage. So as a little kid, I used to play up there, and Nathaniel was my best friend. We'd color and we'd talk, and we had a blast.
How old was that house you were in?
The house I was in was built by my great-grandfather in 1905. But the house that had been torn down to make room for the gas station was 1800s.
Okay. So he would have...
He moved to...
He moved
to where he was comfortable. He'd been kept secluded for so long. So the second story of my aunt's house that no one ever went up to was perfect for him.
Was this kind of only you, or did this kind of ability run in your family at all?
I was adopted.
Okay.
When I was a baby, so it didn't run in my adopted family. I've since found my birth family, and some of them have different gifts, but not like mine.
That side,
I don't think they use them. They didn't develop them. I spent a lot of time developing what I do.
That side of your family Irish?
Part of it.
And how about American Indian?
No. Italian, Lithuanian, German, Britain, Irish.
I'm asking that because I found that in talking to people who are intuitive, we seem, if you're Caucasian, our indigenous background seems to be Welsh, Irish, Scottish, Scandinavian, and then over Scandinavia with a dip into Germany where the Black Forest is, or the inside of the boot of Italy along the coast, and then the coast of France, Spain, Portugal, with a chunk again back south of the tip of Africa and Morocco. If your ancestors are from there, going back 200 or 300, well, 300 or 400 years, you were most likely very intuitive if you were Caucasian.
That's interesting.
It was almost like if you went back 300 years ago in those places, we were still living with the earth and not off of the earth. So we still believed in what we call now elemental beings, and we saw things in the bush, and we saw these things coming out of the water and going back in, and it was just that, and that inside of the boot of Italy and along the coast there of the Mediterranean.
That's where my Italian relatives are from.
That's going back a couple of hundred years. Those are gypsies.
Right.
Yeah, which is if you start following some of the newer television series and documentaries on Atlantis and things like that, that seems to be a very busy area, and especially Morocco, where the Atlantean mountains are and all that. That area was always this was traced back to Atlantis, and so you're thinking, why is that a big deal? But it's a whole different DNA, not DNA, but blood.
It's a whole different makeup, yeah.
But the Welsh, Irish, Scottish, especially the Irish, that was like they're completely isolated for a long time out there.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny you should say that because one of my mentors was Welsh, and I was trained in the old ways, before Wiccan was Wiccan. It was more Druid, it was more pagan. It was, I was trained in those ways.
Yeah, it's very, very interesting on looking back at that and what our history is. And I throw in American Indian, or in Canada we just call them First Nations. If again, any indigenous population of North, Central, or South America, if you went back 300 years, they lived with the land.
Yes.
And their beliefs.
And it's funny you should mention the First Nations, because I seem to attract, for lack of a better word, Native American spirits.
Interesting. That also could be just from where you're from. If you're living in Michigan and grew up there near a lake, you are in an area that was incredibly populated with First Nations.
Yeah, I grew up, I was born in Indiana. We moved here when I was young, and I spent a lot of time inland. But it doesn't seem to matter where I am. I always seem to attract, even in my travels, when I traveled out west and stuff like that when I was younger, I always seem to attract those types of spirits. And I have no problem with that. I think it's awesome.
Oh, yeah, it would. It's probably just your energy. It's the vibration that you have.
Yeah, it probably is. Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah. So in fact, one of them on a case I was at, it used to be the house we were in used to be a railroad stop. And the railroad's gone, and it's a large piece of property, and there's woods at the back. And I was drawn to those woods, and I said, I have to go outside. So I went out there, and lined up just inside the tree line were just everywhere I looked. There was Native American spirits, and one of the medicine men came forward, the shamans came forward, and he motioned me to follow him. And I followed him into the woods, and they were all around me, and we got to this depression in the ground, and he pointed to it, and I dug under all these leaves and debris, and there was this big walking stick, like just a big branch that was like a walking stick. And he telepathically said, "This is my gift to you." And I still have it. It was very touching for me. It was very emotional.
That's amazing. A lot of strength and historic energy in there.
Yes. Yes.
Growing up intuitive, some people say psychic, but intuitive.
I call it a medium. I'm a medium.
You're a medium. I used to have an episode of my live podcast with I had two psychics on it, and it was two mediums and a large. But anyway, so I've been told I'm a medium. I'm a evidential medium, which is odd. I've seen dead people since I was a kid, but there was a time as a policeman I didn't see them. I didn't see them all the time. I saw a couple in like 28 years. But I saw a bunch when I was a kid. Then was a policeman. There was like this dead period.
Maybe you were on the wrong path.
I could have been on the wrong path, or it was shut off because I was around a lot of dead people.
Maybe that was it.
Like car accidents and going into people's houses to check on their next of kin, and then finding them like, this is why Uncle Bob hasn't phoned you. He's been dead for 2 weeks. That kind of thing. But it was like I wasn't supposed to seeing, being bothered by dead people anymore. And then
that's probably for your own sanity.
Yeah. Well, that didn't help. So
that ship has sailed for me too. So
yeah. Did you ever have a time in your life where it was shut off?
No, I had times when I ignored it, but that was my choice. It wasn't shut off. I just chose to ignore it.
Yeah. How do you kind of calm it down, or actually how do you bubble yourself going into an area that is extremely active, and then all the dead people going, "Hey, look, she can see us. Let's go talk to her, and maybe she can help us leave here." And you just, I'm just shopping right now. Leave me alone.
Yeah, I operate on energy. Everything's energy with me. So once I feel like think of it as a radio frequency. There's high frequencies and there's low frequencies. And I figure out where they are. Are they operating at a low frequency? If so, I'm going to raise my frequency. They can't get to me. If they're operating on a high frequency, I lower mine. So the only thing that's going to get through is something that's very powerful or something that really needs my help.
Okay.
So I raise or lower my vibration either way, depending on where they're operating at, what vibration they're at. And if I go into a haunted location, like on a case, I just drop everything and I just let everything come in and then I sort it out.
Okay. See, that's interesting, and I've never thought of it that way. Maybe you can help me answer this question. I was in or maybe you've had this experience too. I was in a pub which was haunted. It was a church at one time. And
that's fine.
I looked over across into a larger portion of the pub, like a dance area, and which I guess was the main part of the church, where the pews would have been. And there was a gentleman there in a derby hat, had a beard, and a 3/4 length black jacket, which was extremely common garb for a male back in the late 1800s in this area. Like every time you saw it, it's like, hey, I saw the same ghost from at this place that I saw 20 miles away. I said, no, they all just wore the same clothes. But standing behind him was a lady, a very tall, slim lady, scowling at me as I was standing beside the bar. And scowling, like, not at just me, but everybody at the bar, the bartender, the waitresses, and everything. And I'm looking at her, and the gentleman is completely oblivious. And I looked at them, and I got the feeling that they couldn't even see each other. Like they were
probably from two different times.
See, and that's what I was wondering. It's like I was looking at them, I could see them, but it was like, like they were two different photographs in the same book. It's
right.
So they can do that. In your experience, they can be, you can see two different things, but they themselves can't see each other.
Yeah, sometimes they're not aware of each other. Sometimes they choose not to be aware of each other. And I've had an experience where they were very aware of each other, and that was the problem. So that was actually in a church, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
We had a caretaker in the old part of the church that had been around in the 1800s. And then we had a caretaker in the new part of the church that had been around since the 1940s. And he passed away in the 60s, I think. But he always took care of the church. So the caretaker from the 1800s was ticked off that this other spirit is doing his job. And the way he manifested that was to scare the teenagers who were in his part of the building, which is now a teen room with a pool table and all that. So he terrorized them because he was so ticked off at this other caretaker. So I just did some negotiations. And things have calmed down,
Good. And that's the important part. Sometimes they need somebody to come in there and as a counselor.
Right. It's like, okay, here's the deal. This is the doorway that separates the old part of the church from the new part of the church. You stay in your part of the church and you stay in your part of the church.
Yeah.
And that's all it took. And they both agreed to it. And things have settled down.
And things have got better.
Yeah.
In your writings, you've got, like, as I say, you've got a number of books. Which would be one of the ones that you struggled with spiritually to get through? And I mean, when I say struggle with, running into something a little more negative, or in your research, running into something that was unexpected.
It would be Something Wicked.
Oh, okay.
That is a book about demons. And demonic possession and all the little negative things that come out and get you when you least expect it. That was, without a doubt, the hardest book for me to get through, only because I'd had a personal experience with a demonic a few years before I wrote it. And it took me 13 years to finally work on that book.
Something Wicked.
Yes.
Tell me about your negative experience.
Where I used to live, there was this mansion. It was built probably about 1857, 3 stories tall, beautiful, even though it was in a state of disrepair. And I had just moved out to that area, and I met someone who became one of my friends, and she told me about this house, and everybody in town was talking about the house on the hill, the house on the hill. And my friend knew the current owners who had been starting to renovate it, and that fell apart. But she had a key, so she said, "Do you want to see it?" I said, yeah. Who doesn't? So she took me over there, and we're walking around the outside of the property, and it was huge. The house was 6,000 square feet. The original footprint was 3,000, and then an addition of it put on in the 1900s of another 3,000, plus a basement. So I walked up the porch steps, and I grabbed onto the door handle, and something growled at me, big growl. And I said, "Do they have a dog?" She said, "No, there's nothing in there." I said, "No, there's a dog in there. Like, warning 1, totally blew through that, right?" So we went around to the side of the house, and we walked into the addition. That's where we could get in. Front door was blocked, and there was nothing in the addition. It felt good. And then I crossed into the threshold, and I immediately felt this energy I'd never felt before. And I said, "This can't be good." And it was coming up through the first floor like it was in the basement. So, and there was other spirits in the house. I mean, the original owner was there. His son was there. His granddaughter would pop in occasionally. There were other spirits there. And I got to go to the basement. So I found the basement, and I went down the stairs, and the basement is huge. And every floor in that basement is cement except for one. And that's the room on the left. And I turned in that room first, and it was a dirt floor, and there was a furnace and a hot water heater, and it was a long rectangular room that ran toward the front of the house. And there was a hole in the far wall that went under the front porch. And I'm like, wow, why is there a hole there? I got to go check that out. So I started walking toward that, and something literally grabbed me and threw me against the back wall.
Wow.
And I got up, and I said, what the hell was that? Honestly. And I said, it's ridiculous. No spirit's going to chase me out of here. This is stupid. So I started to walk again, and this time everything went white, then it went red, and I couldn't see. And I literally had to feel my way out of the room, and the second I got out of that room, it cleared up. But I still didn't put 2 and 2 together because I'd never run into an entity like that before. So I started spending months in that house. I had a key. I'd go in. I'd talk to James, who was one of the son of the original owner. We'd talk all the time. I kind of avoided the basement. And then I said, no, that's stupid. Don't avoid the basement. So I kept going down, and this thing kept giving me warnings to get it out, and I wouldn't. Kept going back. I kept on, poking it with a stick to see how it would react, which is really stupid. And then one night my friend and I were driving home from somewhere, and we stopped at the house. It's like 1:00 in the morning. And when you stop on the road by the house, you're facing the side of the house. The main part of the house faces the main road. We were on a side street, and the driveway was on the side road. So we pull in the driveway, we get out of the car, and we're walking toward the house. And I started to feel really nauseous. Really, really sick, like so sick I was leaning up against a tree. And I happened to glance up at the second floor between the 2 windows, and this monster came out of this window, out of the wall. And I looked at my friend, and I'm like, run. And she doesn't have a psychic bone in her body. And she's like, what do you mean? And I could feel all this energy, this wall of energy coming toward me. And I'm like, just run. And we had run back to the car, and I happened to turn around, and out of nowhere, a silver big wolf had jumped in front of me, and this energy that was coming at me. And I have no idea where this thing came from. So we got in the car, we left. I took her home. I went home. I jumped online, found one of my friends who was a demonologist, and I told him what happened. And he said, describe this entity, and I did. And he goes, that's Aman. Aman is a lower prince. He commands 10. He commands 30 legions. There's 10,000 demons per legion. Do the math. And I said, how do I get rid of it? And he said, you're going to have to figure that out. Everything's different. You have to figure it out. I'm not there. So then this thing started attacking me in my own house. And there's nothing I could do. And I finally had it. So I came up with a ritual. I did a lot of research, came up with a ritual. I went back to the house. I was right in the middle of performing this ritual. I was almost to the end. I almost had it gone, and I stopped. And this entity, Aman, appeared before me, and he said, you stopped. I said, yes. And he said, why? And I said, because if I got rid of you, that makes me no better than you, and I'm way better than you. And I said, but know this, I'm not afraid of you anymore. There's nothing you can do to hurt me. And I just turned around and walked away, and that was it. Now today, in hindsight, I would zap him in a heartbeat. And that's in a nutshell what happened.
When you say the type of demon it was, what was the word? Is it mine, M-I-N-E, or mime?
No, it's Aman. A-M-O-N. That's his name.
M-A-O-N.
A-M-O-N. Aman.
Oh, okay. Now I got it.
And a lot of people, they think that if you utter a demon's name, it summons them to you, or draws them to you. I think the opposite. I think that if you know a demon's name, it gives you power over them in some way. Not a lot, right, but it gives you an edge.
Yeah.
So it doesn't bother me to say his name.
Running into like dead things and dark things. We were at I don't know if you're familiar with the term residential school, but in Canada back in the 1800s and right up until the 1980s, the First Nations people, children were taken away from their families and put into schools run by the church to basically teach the Indian out of them. And they were horrific places of sexual abuse and murder.
That's just so sad.
Yeah, and we did investigations in those places, and the energies that are in there are all over the place, from children that are afraid to leave to good spirits that are hanging out, kind of protecting them from the creepy old priests that, of course, crossed over, and on and on and on. But some of the things that we see are like, almost you can describe it as a black towel moving by itself, wobbling across the walls. It's creepy things. But I've come out of there thinking that, and we'll get, I kind of look at demons as being elemental beings that have always existed, and they're just here. We just call them demons because of what they look like and the nasty crap they do. But we can react to them as we would an elemental being. And
now, see, I've run into an elemental, and I have seen a distinct difference.
Yeah, because there's good ones and bad ones.
The one I ran into, the elemental, it was my impression that it didn't understand right, wrong, good, evil. It had a mission. It had a job. Mm-hmm. Okay, because elementals are summoned. This particular elemental was summoned by women of color who were escaping slavery, and they were on the Underground Railroad. And so on their journey, they were in a barn. They were staying in a barn. And in the barn, they had children, and 2 of the babies died, and they were buried under the dirt floor of the barn. And when they did that, we believe they used hoodoo or voodoo to summon an elemental to protect these babies. Well, the man who owns the barn now raises thoroughbreds, and he was digging a channel for a water line. He was going to make that barn a birthing stall because he had already built another barn. And he dug up these 2 things wrapped in blankets. Well, he's a physician. He opened one of them, and there was a skeleton of a baby, and he was immediately thrown 30 feet across the room. He reburied the baby. Everything was fine. His son could play in there with no problem. Nothing ever happened to his son. He called in several other groups besides ours. Everyone went in there with the intention of getting rid of it, and they were just, loved. They were thrown. They had rings thrown at them, and I went in there when we were called in. I went in there and said, okay, here's the thing. I don't want to get rid of you. I just want to know your story. Mm-hmm. I'm in a completely different mindset. The team went in with that mindset, and this thing just played with us all night. I mean, we'd see the shadows, and then we were outside, and his son had a pitching machine up in one of the lofts with tennis balls, and tennis balls were being shot over our head, not at us. They had a clean shot. They could have hit us anytime they wanted to. And no, it was shooting over our head. It was playing with us. And nothing bad happened to any of my team members because we just wanted to find out its story. And at the end of the night, I don't know, it's 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, my partner James and I walked back into the barn one last time. And I went in, I said, thank you for respecting us. And we hope that we honored you by respecting you. And, we're going to leave, and, that's it. And at that moment, lightning shot across the top of the barn, inside the barn.
Wow.
And James and I looked at each other and went, God, that was cool. I said, could you do that again? And it did. Big bolt of lightning went flying across the barn, and you could feel the electricity. And thank you, have a good night. We walked out, and everything's fine now. So would I call it a demonic or a negative entity? No. Did it know right from wrong? No. Did it know good from evil? No. It just knew its job was to protect those children. By any means it had to use. Because if you went in there with an attitude of, I'm going to get rid of you, it felt threatened and it couldn't do its job. So yes, it's going to attack. If you went in there with, I don't want to get rid of you, I just want to know why you're here, it played with you all night.
And that's something you really should do. Going into any type of paranormal investigation anywhere is walk in with curiosity and trying to get the story of whatever is in there, as opposed to, we're out here to get you out of there. And because one of the things you say at the beginning of any kind of conversations you can have with them, you introduce yourself and say, I'm here not to get rid of you or not to demean you or ridicule you. I'm just here to talk to you and find out why you're here.
And that's how my team operates. That's how my team's always operated. But unfortunately, there's teams out there that don't operate in that way, as you and I both know.
Oh, yeah.
No, I mean, our team, we go in, we just want to figure out what's there. We just want to know the story. We just want to try to help this family, but we also want to try to help the spirit.
And sometimes you find that the spirit is just they're lost anyway, or they're
some of them are lost. Some of them, there's someone else. I always tell people, imagine how you would feel if you died, didn't know you were dead. All of a sudden, there's strange people living in your house. All these things are gone. I said, yeah, you're going to act out. You're frustrated. You're upset. You don't understand what's going on. Violence doesn't always mean negative entity. It could be a scared, desperate, frustrated spirit. And that's how I look at it until the spirit proves me otherwise.
Also, I did learn you never come into a property and say, hey, do you know you're dead?
No, I try to ease them into that.
Yeah, telling a ghost it's dead for the first time can probably leave the occupants of that property a little bit concerned, because we get to say, hey, you're dead? Oh, you didn't? Well, we're going home now. Have a nice night. And instead of just having lights flickering, you've got the TV coming on or the stereo coming on at 3 o'clock in the morning, and all the kitchen cupboards opening and slamming and doors creaking and crashing and things flying around because you've got a very upset dead person in the house.
Well, I mean, if I go in and once they realize once I've made them realize that that they've passed, I don't leave that house until I help them cross. Because they're like, well, what do I do now? What do I do now? And it's like, well, do you see a light? No, I don't see a light anywhere. Okay, calm down, calm down. I'm going to open one for you. I'm going to open a path for you. All you have to do is go through it, and it'll be fine. Trust me. You just have to trust me. It's going to be fine. And I literally opened a bridge for them and let them cross.
This is something you might find interesting. We did a clearing of a house remotely, and I had been in this home before, and I had one of the ghosts walk completely through my body, and I felt her go through, and I held the little EMF detector up against me, and it actually was going off as she was walking through me.
Oh, don't you hate that feeling? Oh, gosh.
It never happened to me before. It was kind of interesting. And then she kissed me twice on the cheek.
Aw, that's sweet.
So I was telling the psychic this, and she says, oh, no. The woman who walked through you did not like you. That's why she walked through you. Because
that's so funny.
I would ask a question, and you know how you wait like 20 seconds or so for them to get enough energy to answer? Well, I was not waiting long enough for them, and she got frustrated and just walked through me, and I got kissed on the cheek by a little 8-year-old girl ghost.
Aww.
Which I kind of thought was funny. So I said, well, she was 8 years old. I'm like 6'2". How did she kiss me on the cheek? And the psychic said, because she's a ghost, for goodness sakes. So of course she can kiss you on the cheek. But we crossed them over, and of course they all go to the light. Well, there was a lady upstairs from the 1800s. It was a Chinese lady who the occupant of the house who was out collecting crystals on a creek. First Nations lady who did energy work in the house in one end of the house was getting crystals out of this creek. And this old Chinese lady from the late 1800s, her ghost followed her home. And she occupied the sewing room upstairs. So the little 8-year-old ghost who was giving us the tour, the lady who walked through me, she called her Nana downstairs, and then there was Nana upstairs. So we crossed Nana. Cute. We crossed the Nana downstairs. We crossed a gentleman who, on a farm worker, one of the hands, him over, the 8-year-old. And then finally we went up to the Chinese lady. And as, where's the light kind of thing? And the psychic says, okay, I'm feeling really wobbly right now. I don't understand. And she's sitting in a chair in Washington State somewhere. And she says, I'm wobbly. And then she paused and said, no, I'm standing on a boat in the middle of the river. So the lady, this 85-year-old Chinese lady who died in the late 1800s, her belief system crossed a river as opposed to went to a light.
Oh, so that's what she was trying to do.
So she actually crossed the river, and the psychic was standing on a boat in the middle of the river watching her cross with a whole bunch of people greeting her on the other side. But it was like we all cross what our belief systems are, I guess.
I think so. I fortunately or unfortunately, depending on how you want to look at it, I suppose. If I'm dealing with a child spirit now, my dad passed in 1999. And he has now become my finder. So if I have a child spirit, I kind of get a hold of my dad. I'm like, Dad, you got to go find this kid's parents, or someone this child knows. And my dad does help find someone this child knows. So when I can walk them halfway across the bridge, they see someone they know and they'll run the rest of the way.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
So that's what I try to do with a child.
Because I don't see them as often as I used to, and even in a paranormal investigation, I'll see shadows or like a wall of twinkling lights, if that makes any sense, like a light mist.
Yeah,
a mist, twinkling lights. The psychic that is there usually remotely will do all the visualization, and I'll do the interview through the psychic, and I get told off quite often. Ghosts, but it's because
our team, one of my partners, one of my investigators, James, he's our scientific guy, he's our tech guy. He follows me around with a video camera from the time I get out of the car to the time we leave, and then we turn the tape over to our researcher, and she researches everything I've said and what we can document. That's what we tell the client. What we can't, we don't. or we'll tell them if we feel they need to know and say, but we weren't able to document this through historical records. So we make a distinction so they know, and we give them copies of all the research we found.
And that's the right way to do things. Because I was on 2 paranormal teams that literally would go into a place, get pictures of ghosts, get audio conversations with them, and not share it with the client.
Yeah, no, we try to share, like we'll play the EVPs if we get them. If I say, well, this guy was on the railroad, this is his name, he was a professional gambler who rode the rails, this was a boarding house, and he stayed in this room and he's talking to me, like we try to figure out who this guy is. And we try to document as much as we possibly can before we go back in and meet with the client. And any documentation we find, we're going to give to them. And then we give them what we think they should do. It's always their choice. It's also the spirit's choice. If the spirit wants to cross, I'm going to cross them. If they're not ready, then I'm going to figure out a way for them to cohabitate.
Yeah, perfect. Come up with an agreement that you're not going to do things like slamming doors at 3 o'clock in the morning because I got to be up at 6. Things like that.
Yeah.
And
please stay out of my children's bedrooms.
Yeah.
That type of thing. We negotiate and we come up with a plan that works for the spirit as well as for the living. And most of the times the spirit wants to go, though. They just wanted to be heard. They just wanted to be acknowledged, so it works out one way or the other.
We are talking to Debi Chestnut, and you can go to her website, authordebichestnut.com. That's Debi, D-E-B-I. So again, authordebichestnut.com. And you can take a look at our myriad of books on the paranormal that she has written. And this is based on her experience and her investigations. It's quite a fine list of books if you are interested in things that go bump in the night and possibly even going out and looking for stuff like that yourself. Or if you have an experience, or if you have a house that you think is haunted, or if you maybe thought you had one when you were a kid and you want to look up the different things that create a real, truly haunted house. Go to Debi Chestnut, her website. You can follow her on Facebook, too. Debi Chestnut, look her up on the Facebook. You've just released Is Your House Haunted, the 2nd edition, and that
yes.
you can find that on Amazon. What are the ways you can find somebody's house is haunted? Like, how do you... if I grab the book and now I'm going to find out if my house is haunted or not.
It's like a it's like a do-it-yourself manual for homeowners. It's, is this activity, what is your activity? This is the logical explanation you look for, and I give examples, a lot of times people say, oh, well, I hear something in the wall. Well, check for critters. Sometimes there's a raccoon down the chimney flue.
Yeah.
So I always try to, sometimes it's squirrels, sometimes it's branches rubbing against a house or a window. Sometimes there's something wrong with your electrical system and you have high EMF, which has an effect on some people. They hallucinate. It usually happens in basements because that's where your electrical panel is. Get an electrician out there to check out your house. And then I go through the types of hauntings there are, residual, intelligent, etc. I go through the different types of spirits, what their motivations are, how they usually behave. And, I have a big section on there on how to talk to your kids about ghosts, what to do if your kid is psychic, that type of thing. And then, some ways that they can get rid of it. And I always include my email in every book so that if they need help, they can contact me and I can give them individual attention and find out what's going on and try to help them.
What's your email?
It's Debi Chestnut at yahoo.com.
Oh, that's easy.
Yeah. And I get emails from all over the world. I've gotten them from Australia, Russia, China, Japan, Australia, England, Ireland, Scotland, Europe, Germany, all over the world. I get emails from people who have read the book and just want to talk about it, or they're having a problem and they want to talk about it. Or a lot of times I find that I get a lot of emails from teenagers, kids, who think they have psychic gifts and they're scared and they're afraid to tell their parents.
Wow.
So I tell them, look, you're under 18. I can't be talking to you. You need to get me your parents' permission.
Oh, really? You basically, under 18, you won't...
I try to help them as much as I can in general.
Yeah, okay, Debbie, I get it. That makes sense. Get that conversation started with the family and get them together as a group. Because, face it, they talk together daily. It's not like just an email from you once a week or once a month. At least they can keep that conversation going and... their little one feel a little bit more comfortable about bringing it forward. And you can gather information for them and, pass them off in a certain direction where you think they will be able to learn a little bit more by themselves. And legitimate information, not woo-woo stuff you see on TV.
I'll direct them to other information, or, sometimes they're in denial. Well, I don't want my kid to be a freak. Your kid's not a freak. Your kid has a gift, just as if they were gifted in academics or gifted in sports. They have a gift, and you need to nurture this gift, and you need to teach them how to control it, or you need to let me teach them how to control it. Otherwise, your child's going to have problems. Your child's scared to death, and that's the bottom line. I mean, I don't mince words with them. This is, I grew up psychic. I grew up a medium. I had to hide it for years, and I don't want any other child to have to do that, not in this day and age.
Yeah, sometimes you just have to hit the nail really hard with the hammer.
Sometimes you have to wake them up. This is your kid, I mean, I grew up in a different time. I grew up in the 60s. I was a product of the 60s and 70s. My parents were very old school. They didn't believe in what I did. And I was drugged from psychiatrist to psychiatrist, trying to figure out what was wrong with me, and there was nothing wrong with me. And finally, I hit upon a psychiatrist. They hit upon a psychiatrist who figured out what was going on. And I think I was 7. And he sat me down privately and he said, look, here's the deal. The world's not ready for you yet. I'm going to tell your parents you have an overactive imagination because I want to keep you out of an institution because you don't belong there. And that was the bottom line.
And that was the fear back then, too. You'd be institutionalized because you were seeing things. Right.
So I hid it for years. I mean, my best friend didn't know I could see spirits until I was 43 years old. And I don't want any child to have to live with that. I don't want any child to have to go through that and be terrorized by a spirit because they're afraid to tell their parents or tell someone who can help them. I don't think that's right to do to any child, having lived through it myself.
Yeah, it's a good example once you've lived that life. And in hindsight, you go back and say, it would have been much better if this is what happened. And then you have that knowledge coming in to help somebody else.
Yes.
You've got a book out, and it's called How to Clear Your Home of Ghosts and Spirits.
Yes.
And that's another self-help book. It's how would you recommend somebody clearing something out of a house, or does it obviously depend on what the heck it is in the house that they need to clear and how they identify it?
A lot of it depends on what it is. I mean, always the first thing I tell people, well, have you tried talking to it? Not screaming at it, not yelling at it, not swearing at it, just talking to it. Hey, look, I know you're here. I'd like to help you. I just don't know how to help you. Let's see if we can work through this. Or say, you don't belong here. You need to go. I mean, it could be something as simple as that. Talking is always the first line of defense, unless, of course, you're being pushed downstairs and you have a violent spirit. In that case, I tell them, if you're religious, get a member of clergy in there, bless the house. Here's how you can smudge your own house. Here's how you can use crystals. Here's how you can use incense. I give them a variety of things to try. But I do it with an air of caution as well. If you have something that's acting out in a violent manner and you're being scratched and you're being physically attacked, or someone in your household is being physically attacked, you need to get a team in there. You need to get someone in there that knows what they're doing. Don't engage this thing on your own. And a lot of people don't understand, especially when it comes to a demonic, for lack of a better word. is that a demonic entity there's one rule they must follow. Only one, but it's a very important rule, and they take it very literally. And that rule is they must be invited in some way. So, for example, let's say you buy a house and you move in and you think you have a ghost. Well, if you don't do anything to try to get rid of that spirit, that really isn't a ghost, that's really a demon, by not doing anything, you have invited that spirit. You've made it okay for that entity to be in your home. As a ghost hunter, if you go to a place and there's a negative entity and you leave immediately and don't go back, you're going to be fine. If you go back and you poke it with a stick and you keep going back, it's going to follow you home. You've invited it into your life. So I stress that a lot in that book and in Something Wicked. Don't take paranormal activity in your home lightly. You don't know what it is. You might think you have a child spirit. That's great. But what if that child spirit isn't a child? Because an entity like that, a negative entity like that, is going to do anything they can to gain your trust. So it doesn't have to, so you're inviting it in. Like if it appears as your grandmother, your grandfather, or someone you're going to think that's who it is. Not always. So, there's always a caveat.
Oh, great. I have this ghost in the house here. We just leave her here. Call her Annie. I was told she's like from the neighborhood from a long time ago. And she actually pointed out I had a tenant who opened a portal up, which was a whole other story. But we ended up having to clear 9 beings from the house. A few of them were ghosts. Some are from the eastern U.S., which is bizarre.
And, interesting.
And Annie, and they were helped, or the psychic and the shaman were helped by 4 elemental beings from under the house. They came up to help clear these things out, and then they sealed it off. They sealed the portal, sealed off, and then they opened up another portal up in a room downstairs, and every dead person in the neighborhood who wanted to go came through. And then sealed that thing off. But Annie's still around here, and I'm really hoping Annie isn't a demon.
No, you would know by now.
Yeah.
But sometimes spirits just like to hang around, and, if they're not causing any problem, fine. I don't have a problem with that. I mean, I've lived in a haunted house. The one I live in now, I have a man and woman shadow person who have never really done anything. Other than coming down the stairs, you see them come down the stairs. Actually, one of my cats sees them a split second before I do. That's my early warning system, but they're harmless. As long as they don't do anything and they're rather benign, I don't care if they're here. It doesn't bother me. I mean, I've had people give me haunted objects, depending on what it is. Okay. I have a haunted painting hanging above my bed. It doesn't bother me.
When you say haunted painting, is it just that it has an attachment, or is it an energy that's around it, or is it?
It has an attachment.
And that attachment is a human dead person that for some reason just wants to be in or around or with that painting?
Yes. It was actually there's actually a story behind that. I have a friend that lives about 3 hours north of me. And she has this amazing Victorian home. It looks like a museum when you walk in. It's simply gorgeous. And she's fond of antique stores and flea markets and garage sales. Okay. So she called me and she goes, "Hey, are you coming up north this weekend?" And I'm like, "Why? What did you buy?" Because I always know she bought something if she calls. Well, I bought this print. And I said, "Well, send me a picture." So she took a picture. She sent it to me. I look it up. It's The Dance of the Nymphs. It's a beautiful print. It's worth about $150. And I'm like, "Okay, well, tell me what happened." She goes, "Well, I bought it at a flea market, and I brought it home and I hung it in the upstairs hallway across from the linen closet." I'm like, "Okay." And she goes, "Then I went out and no one was home because, her daughter's at college, her husband was at work. She comes home after running to the store and everything is out of her linen closet, neatly folded and in the hallway underneath this painting." And she said, "Well, it freaked me out." And I said, "Well, I mean, not to be rude, but did your linen closet need to be cleaned?" And she goes, "Well, yeah." And I'm like, "Well, there you go." So she said, "So then I moved it and I put it in the upstairs bathroom." And my husband and I went out And unbeknownst to us, our daughter came home from college. She's taking a shower, and someone's rattling the doorknob and pounding on the door. And she thought it was us. And she yelled, "I'll be out in a minute." And it stopped. And then she got out of the shower. There was no one home. So, "Will you come get the painting?" "Yes, I'll come get the print." So I went up there and I got the print, and I said, just out of curiosity, because I know how much it's worth, "How much did you pay for it?" And she goes, "Oh, I got such a good deal. It was only $1. And I'm like, "Did you wonder why?" And she said, "No, but I think I know now." And I'm like, "Yeah." So I brought it home. It's hanging above my bed. It's content just being there. The spirit hasn't really done anything. It's reorganized a couple things on my dresser, but whatever, I can live with that. And it's fine.
Could you send it over to me? I've got some issues with my closet, so I need a.
I know, I did too. And whoever the spirit is, she never cleans out my closet.
Oh, that's funny. I need a maid spirit. But wait, do you see the spirit attached to the painting?
This one, she has not shown herself to me yet. I can feel her energy. When I touch the painting, I can feel the frame. I can feel her energy. I know it's a female. I know she was an older woman and elderly maybe. And she's just content. She's just as content as could be. She just wants to be left alone. She just apparently loved that print in life, and she's just perfectly content being attached to it. So I'm like, it's not hurting anything. What's the big deal? I've explained to her that if she wants to cross, I will give her that opportunity. She's free to go anytime she wants. She's not tied to this painting, and she simply has no desire. So that's up to her. I'm good with it.
Yeah, she's happy.
Yeah, I'm not gonna, unless the spirit is negative or harassing children or being violent. Yeah, I'm not gonna make it leave. I mean, why? I don't see the point.
In your book, How to Clear Your Home of Ghosts and Spirits, do you get into all those things like smudging and all that?
Yeah.
Because I found that sometimes you smudge and the smoke, once the smoke clears and they're waiting outside for it to clear and then they come back in. It's like, have you found that too? Or have you found, other than you showing up and having the conversation and asking him to leave, what would a rookie paranormal ghost person do? And I don't mean paranormal investigator. I mean somebody's got a haunted house. How would they clear their house successfully?
Well, I have a lot of clients that, I put salt around the house and I smudged. Well, why'd you put salt? Because someone said to. But yes, if the energy is negative, it cannot cross the salt. So you have trapped this being in your house. This is why smudging didn't work. So I make them get rid of the salt. I tell them to open a window at the farthest point of their house where they're going to end up. And then I have them start in the attic. I have them go to the basement. And then I have them work in a pattern, crisscross around their house till they get to the room with the window. And I have them start in the farthest away from that window as they possibly can, and then work their way across the room to the window. And in theory, this spirit's going to go out that open window. I said, you have to leave them a way out.
Yeah.
Once you smudge, then you can put the salt down. So that works for a lot of people. Personally, I can't stand the smell of sage.
Yeah, it's very heavy. I use Palo Santo wood because it's sweeter and a little lighter.
I use incense.
Incense is very good.
When I smudge, I use like frankincense and myrrh.
Oh, so you're going all biblical on it.
Yeah, or I'll use dragon's blood, incense, something like that, because it's a more pleasant smell and it doesn't really smoke you out of your house.
My friend Rocky, who we ended up having a psychic, a remote view, clear ghost out of her place. And it's actually on a fellow, Philip Solo TV, Philip Solo, S-O-L-O TV on YouTube. Mm-hmm. Most of the camera systems failed to record the event, but he's got one camera that actually worked and caught a bit of it. But Rocky, a few months ago, before this, she lived in the bottom of an old house. She smudged her daughter in hers rooms, but she didn't open the door first. So she worked around, she smudged it, and then she came up to the door to open it, and it was the only entrance and exit to the suite from the outside. Uh-huh. And the door wouldn't open. The lock had basically fused. The doorknob wouldn't work. So they had to, until they got the door fixed, they had to come and go out the window.
Oh my gosh.
So it was like, Oh, yeah, I felt something really heavy in the house, and it was really weird. So we smudged, and I went to open the door, and it doesn't open anymore. It's like,
Yeah, because it didn't want to go.
Yeah, try to open the door first next time.
Yeah, I always make them open a window.
Yeah, that's what I usually do too.
At the farthest point of the house, so you do everything else, and you just work your way toward that room. So it's doing. It's like herding any spirit toward that one room, because it's always going to go away from if it's a negative spirit, it's always going to go away from the smoke.
Yeah.
I said, but if you have a spirit in there that isn't negative, smudging's not going to get rid of it. Smudging works for a negative entity.
See, and that's really important to say. Smudging only works for negative energies.
Right. It doesn't work for any energy.
The ones that want to be there and aren't bad, they just think, oh, this isn't for me. I'm going to leave, and then I'm going to come back in.
Right. So it's only going to work for a negative entity. The ones that aren't negative, that want to be there, those are the ones you can usually talk to and say, hey, I know you're here, and I'm cool with that, but here's some ground rules. And I lay down the ground rules. You're not allowed in my children's bedrooms. You are not allowed to scare my children. You're not allowed around my children. You're not allowed to hurt any of my pets. You're not allowed to hurt any living person or thing in this house. Unless, of course, it's a spider, knock yourself out. But, basically, you lay down the rules. No slamming doors at 3 o'clock in the morning. Do not throw any dishes out of the kitchen cabinet, because that's going to get you kicked out real fast. I don't mind if you start the coffee pot around 5:30. We're good with that. But, make it kind of fun for them, lay down some ground rules. I find that a lot of my clients are cohabitating with a spirit, and they love having them there. They'd miss them if they were gone. They have this relationship, Case in point, there was a small town by me. There was a little girl that was killed in a horse and buggy accident back in the 1800s. And her spirit is in the house right by where that accident happened. And the people that own the house love her. They have dedicated a bedroom, and they've decorated it in the way it would have been decorated when she was alive, with the toys that she would have had when she was alive. She's kind of interactive. If you throw like a red ball or a ball up the stairs, she'll toss it back down to you. And I said, this is what you've got. This is what happened. Do you want me to see if she'll cross over? And they're like, oh my goodness, no. What would we do without her? Our kids are grown and gone. She's like our child.
Well, that's fascinating to have that connection with somebody who's passed.
Right. And the spirit is, the little girl's very happy with that arrangement, because she's not lonely. She has some interaction with the living. They're very good to her. It's almost like a codependent relationship, but it's also mutually beneficial in some ways.
Do you get names when you're communicating?
I do
with them?
sometimes, not a lot. I hardly ever get names. I don't know why.
I think that's really something to look at, because psychic Skeeter that I use very seldom get names.
Yeah,
very seldom.
I hardly get names unless they come out and say my name is.
Or sometimes you ask them and they'll say, I don't remember, or I don't know, which I thought was weird.
It's almost like a game, I think, sometimes, because in the church I was in, the caretaker that had been there in the 40s, I'm like, you need to tell me who you are so I can tell the minister, so we can make this reverend, so we can make this work. And he showed me a pair of wings, big wings, white wings. I said, why am I seeing angel wings? They look like angel wings, like your stereotypical white, big angel wings. And the reverend goes, oh, the caretaker that was here, his favorite song had something about angel wings in it. And I said, what was his name? And she told me. I go, that's who he is. That's how they tell me. They show me things, or they'll show me like a little video clip, like watching a movie. And they give me little hints, and only someone who knows them is going to know what they mean, or someone they knew, or someone they're attached to. They're going to know what that means.
When I see and it's not a ghost per se, it's a person that's standing like to your left. I usually, if I'm talking to somebody and looking at them, I'll see. This is where things have changed for me, from seeing like a dead person that's not attached to anybody. I see a person that's actually died, crossed over and just come back to help the person. And I see them and they give me hand signals, or they'll point out, kind of show me something on their clothes. And from that, I'm relaying it to the person, and the person said, oh yeah, it would be my grandmother on my mother's side, because that's her brooch and that's the kind of shoes she would wear, and that was the way she helped her hair.
Unless you have like a guy that used to be a professional gambler on a train, in the 1800s. He showed me, he was dressed very flashy for a man of that era, and his hair was like slicked back, and he could tell he was just like really smooth, and he was a player. And I'm like, who are you? And he showed me the train, and I'm like, okay, did you work on the train? And he kind of shot me this really dirty look, and I'm like, okay, no. But you rode the train a lot. And it was yes. And like, what did you do on the train? And then he showed me a deck of cards, and he showed me like poker money, and he showed me poker. I'm like, oh, you were a gambler. You were a hustler. You were a gambler hustler on the train. And he's like, yes. And he was laughing, like, yeah, okay, she figured it out. She's pretty smart. I can deal with her. And then he started telling me like, well, the men on the train, they got bored. It was a long trip. And that's how I made my living. I just like, kept them from being bored, and I relieved them of their money. He was like real slick, and he was real smooth. And he was actually a lot of fun. He was really fun. He was a player. And then on the other side, every time I drive by this one cemetery, which was just down the street from where this haunted mansion was. In order to get to my friend's house, I had to drive by this cemetery, which was very haunted. And every time I drove by it, going to my friend's house, I'd look in my rear, I'd smell cigar smoke, and I'd look in my rearview mirror, and there was a man like dressed in a 3-piece suit with a cane with a very ornate hat on it. He had the bowler hat on. He was a big handlebar mustache, nicely waxed, and he was sitting in the back seat. And he'd disappear when I got by where that haunted house was. And then on the way back, when I went back by, he'd get in at the haunted house, and then he'd disappear when I got to the cemetery, which was a quarter mile down the road. It was like a hitchhiker. It's like, yeah, just drop me off. I'm going to go see my friend. You can pick me up on your way back. It was like very cool. He never said a word to me. He would just smile and nod and like, thank you, or he'd tip his hat. And that was it. It was so cool.
That would be fascinating. I had a guy come home with me from the battlefield of Gettysburg. All the way to here in the Pacific Northwest. That must have been interesting. He wanted to see boats.
Oh, that's cool.
But once he got here, he was more fascinated with my refrigerator. And also my 17-year-old daughter at the time. He was also 17. And talking about names and not being able to get names, this was really frustrating. I had like 3 psychics point this guy out. And we couldn't get a name from him. And it was so frustrating because the Battle of Gettysburg, he told us he died on day 2, and he was attached to an artillery battery on the Confederate side. And you can go and find online everybody who died on day 2 attached to an artillery battery on the Confederate side.
Yeah, there's so many names.
It's so well documented.
Yes.
It's got everybody. And this guy's like, well, I'm not going to tell you my name. In fact, it's not the name I used. I'm not buried under that name anyway. And we're like, well, what are you talking about? But he ended up enlisting at the age of 15, faking his, like, lying about his age and using another name.
He used a fake name. And
it's like, and of course, you look at the psychics, and I look at them and go, okay, sure, there's a guy here, and we finally get a guy. Well, the guy on the I told you about the I was going to call it Titanic, the Queen Mary. We got his name is Timothy or Tim. Oh, sorry, William or Bill. Sorry. And we couldn't get a last name on him. And he said he died on the Queen Mary. Another boat that if you died on the Queen Mary during its service, you would be documented.
Right.
Dying. He said he worked on the boat, he died on the boat. But he died between 1938 and 1945 while it was under, it was called the Grey Ghost. It was under a military contract as a troop ship. Well, everybody who died on that troop ship, their names are still locked down under the security, whatever. It's over 75 years old now. Like, good Lord, we can get his name. But, oh, no, you can't get the name because, we'd have to go to England and have them open the archives, and they're all locked down. It's like, why? Every time I get a ghost where we can actually identify him and find the history like you guys do, go out and find them, it's like, oh, that week? I'm sorry, we don't have any records from that entire week. It's like, oh, come on.
Oh, no, my favorite, they burned in a fire.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But I think my favorite ghost was a ghost named Jake, and he was trapped in a mirror. We talked about this before.
Right.
We were called out to this young man's apartment, and the apartment he was in used to be an antique store. The activity only happened in his bedroom. Trophies would be thrown off the shelves, like it was just a mess. And in his room, in the corner of his room, was a standing antique mirror. I said, "Where did you get that?" And he said, "It was here when I moved in. The owner of the building said never get rid of it." So I said, okay. So we're investigating his room, and I kept on being drawn to this mirror, and I pulled out, just for the camera, because I don't use it, but James was filming, so I pulled out a metal cross I sometimes use as a pendulum. And I'm holding that by the mirror, not on purpose. I was just happened to be standing there. And I said, "Are you here?" And the cross bent on the chain, like not bent, but the chain moved, and it like clamped itself against the mirror. You could hear it hit the mirror. And I went, "That's weird." So we tried it again, and the same thing happened. And I'm like, "Are you in the mirror?" And the spirit went, "Yes." And I'm like, "What's your name?" And he went, "I'm Jake." And I'm like, "Jake, how'd you get stuck in the mirror?" He's like, "I don't know." And I said, "Okay, well, I'll figure out how to get you out of there. Just give me a minute." So James and I went outside, and he goes, "How are we going to get it out of the mirror?" And I said, "Well, I don't know." I said, "I think that what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my hands on the mirror, and for the first time ever, I'm going to let him pass through me, and I'm going to open a portal. I'm going to let him go out." I said, and he goes, "Well, I don't like that plan. What's plan B?" I'm like, "There is no plan B. This is all I got." So we went back in, and I talked to Jake, and I said, "Okay, Jake, here's what's going to happen. I'm going to let you pass through me, but you have to promise you're going to go right through me, and you're going to go into the light that I'm going to open a light for you. You have to go right in. You have to promise." And he went, "I promise, please, anything." And I put my hands on the mirror, and I felt his energy come through me and leave me, and he went right into the light, and he was gone. He stopped long enough to say thank you. To this day, I have no idea how he got trapped in the mirror. I mean, the only way I know of is either through chaos magic or dragon magic. I have no idea how he got trapped there.
Okay, that's going to open up a whole other conversation on dragon magic and chaos magic. So we'll just kind of put that on the shelf right now.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay, because
next show,
that's an entire other conversation on how we as humans manipulate things. Have you ever been down to Tombstone, Arizona?
No, it's on my bucket list.
Yeah, it's a friend of mine. You got to go. My friend Nora Weed runs Wat and Tarbell. It's the last standing or existing mortuary from the 1800s. I think
cool.
they had 4 of them. Wonderfully haunted place.
Oh, awesome.
And she's intuitive. The ghosts all love her. And she opens up one side of it, the actual where the old Black Maria used to pull in, and opens that up for paranormal investigations for anybody who wants to come in the evenings. I said, "What's it like being intuitive in Tombstone?" Like when you walk out you open the front door and look out onto the dirt road. Do you see all these ghosts from like the 1800s in cowboy hats walking down? And she says, "Yes, but I also see ghosts from last Wednesday."
Yeah.
Every dead person ever they love come. It's like a tourist attraction for the dead. They all come to this town.
Yeah, I think one of the funniest things that happened to me as a medium is I went over to Barnes and Noble. All right, you get me in a bookstore, you might as well just come back when it closes because I'm not leaving. And I'm browsing the bargain section, and there's this little old man standing next to me, and he's got on a pair of tan corduroy pants and a button-down shirt and a cardigan sweater that's a size too big for him, and loafers, like cloth loafers, almost like slippers. and he's got gray hair and it's kind of baldy on the top and it's neatly combed. And he goes, oh, you should read this book. And I go, which one? He goes, that one. And he pointed to it. And I said, is it good? He goes, oh, yeah, it's a fabulous book. I think you'll really like it. And I'm like, okay. And we're having this whole conversation. And then I realized everyone's staring at me. And I looked at him and I went, you're a ghost. And he went, gotcha. And he was gone. It was hilarious. I'm like, well played. You know, it was hilarious. It was just hilarious. I'm just like, well played. You know, and if I go over to Barnes and Noble, every once in a while I see him in there and he just nods to me and chuckles and wanders away.
We have a veterans club here called the Billy Bishop Legion, and very, very haunted place, traditionally always been haunted for many, many years. And finally, one of the presidents of the Legion a couple of years ago was intuitive. So she would allow people in to poke around when they could, and it was shut down. And she would walk in the door, and there was a gentleman who was standing by the fireplace who would raise a glass to her. When she came in, he just kind of nod at her because he knew she could see him. Mm-hmm. And we poked around in there a bit, did an investigation. It was a wonderful place. But she was kind of funny too. She would see them like they were just real people.
Yeah, it depends on the spirit. Sometimes they look like a real person, and other times they don't. Sometimes they don't even appear to me. They just talk to me telepathically. Like I feel their presence, but they don't want to show themselves to me, and I'm good with that, whatever they prefer. And there's a town by me called New Baltimore, and it's an old town, 1800s. Used to be a big shipping port back in the day. And every time I walk through downtown New Baltimore at night, I see people from like 2 or 3 different eras. And there's this, one man, he's out for his evening constitutional. He's, tall. He's got one of the top hats on. He's dressed. He's got his cane and he's having his evening cigar. And he'll walk by and he'll see me and he knows I see him. And he just tips his hat and keeps walking. Or you'll see a lady with a parasol walking. So it's like, I always tell people, they're like, well, what's it like? I'm like, okay, you might see 15 people. I see 115 people.
I don't think people realize how many dead people haven't crossed over.
I think that a lot of them have crossed over. They just choose to come back.
Yeah.
They just, because, they obviously loved where they lived or they loved where they were. And they just come back to go for an evening stroll and have a cigar like they used to do, and see how things change. I think the majority of them have crossed over. I think they're just making the choice to visit. Yeah, and I don't think I've ever been somebody who saw the ones that haven't crossed over.
I don't see the ones that have crossed over. I don't think so anyway. My very first full-on, like, standing in front of me like a human being, solid apparition was when I was 16 and I was in a pretty bad car accident. Well, it was a terrible car accident. And 2 children were in the other car and with their dad, and actually there's 3 kids in the other car and the fellow driving it. We got to the hospital and we were all like, they put me up in the front of the ambulance. He was in the back. The hospital staff came and got him, and him and his son walked out. And the dad was obviously shaken up, and the son looked absolutely fine. And it was later I asked my parents if anyone was hurt bad, and they said, well, the boy died. And I looked at them and said, well, he looked fine when I saw him because he was healthy. It must have been internal injuries. And they just stared at me like I was crazy. Yeah, he was going home with his dad. So, but I found, like, he did... years later, because at 25 years, anybody can have access to through where I live. You can go online and pull out a death certificate. Right. But it's a 25-year wait for the public release. And I went back and pulled it, and sure enough, he died in the car. Wow. I saw him, but this is a good point. Was what I was seeing, I just assumed was a ghost who had eventually crossed over, but... I'm pretty sure it was still a ghost because I've never seen, other than the person that stands beside somebody, like their helper person in between their spirit guides and them, that person I know has crossed over and come back and is like volunteered. But I also know that person while they're sitting beside, like, the lady who sits beside you, she's she's the goosebumps on your left arm and your gut feeling and all that, but she's also at the exact same time having a glass of wine on the porch of her favorite location and dancing with her friends when she was in her 20s, because time is flat. It's not linear like we think it's. So that energy is everywhere she wants to be at the exact same time.
Right.
So,
which is so fascinating.
Yeah. So I know that person is somebody who's crossed over and come back. I
don't find a lot that have not crossed. I find more that have crossed and have chosen to come back.
So those are the ones you see when you see somebody walking down the street and things like that?
Most of the time. I mean, I can't tell unless they want help. Like, unless they acknowledge me or they talk to me. Like, the first thing I ask a spirit is, have you crossed over? And if they say, oh, you mean that light thing? Yeah, I did that. Or they'll look at me, they'll go, what? And then I know, okay, they haven't crossed.
Okay, that's interesting, because I
can't look at them and make the distinction.
Okay, that makes sense.
They have to kind of tell me, whether they have or not. I mean, sometimes after you talk to them for a few minutes, you realize that they haven't, or you know that they have.
Do you ever get the ones where you can and this would be possibly an accident or something, where it obviously they're showing you an injury, like a head injury or something, or do you see them complete? Even, let's say
I see them complete.
Okay.
I see them complete, and then they'll, do you know how you died? They'll show me a picture, like, of a car or a hospital room, or they'll make a part of my body hurt, like my chest will hurt or my head will hurt, or it's like, oh, okay, so you died of something, a respiratory illness, like a heart attack, like a lungs, and then they'll go, no, and I'll go, okay, a heart attack, and it was something with my heart. Like, it's easier for them. I think they use less energy if they just make you feel it than if they have to say it.
It's like me with hand signals. I've got down to a list of certain hand signals that are easier for me to see. And those are the ones that have actually crossed over and come back. But that's just the way I see them.
Right, but that's your symbolism. Like,
yeah.
For me, like, if they're getting ready to pull back, and I'm with someone that they love, like a relative or a friend, they'll hold out a red rose, which means I love you in my language.
Oh, that's good.
So they'll hold a red rose out toward that person, and I'm like, they're telling you that they love you. They're holding out a red rose. That's what my symbolism means to me. I had this one lady, she was Italian, and she was showing me a movie of her village in Italy back when she lived there, before she immigrated to the United States. It was like back in the 20s or 30s. And she's like walking me down a street telling me what all these buildings are and what they used to do. And I'm just repeating what she's telling me to her relative. And they're going, oh, yeah, now I know who it is, So they give me a symbol or something that only the person I'm talking to is going to know what it means.
I've been told that those kind of people are evidential mediums. You get evidence that give to the client.
They're trying to validate, like they're validating. And then I have psychometry, like I can hold on to an object or I can touch a building and I see what happened there.
Oh, that'd be awkward.
It's really awkward. Like, I don't know whether you've ever heard of Greenfield Village.
Greenfield Village? No.
Greenfield Village is a big historical village by the Henry Ford Museum in Dearborn, Michigan. And it's like a village. They have like Thomas Edison's house. They have all these old houses for these famous people. And it's a beautiful place. They have a church. I mean, I got married in the church. They have a church. They have sleigh rides in the winter. They have horse and buggy rides. They have blacksmiths. It's a fabulous place to visit. And they hate me because I went on a tour and we're in Thomas Edison's house. And well, this is the furniture that was here. It's exactly where it was. And I'm like, no, it wasn't, because I've seen the houses. They're showing it to me as it was. I'm like, that was over here. That was over there. That was upstairs. That was never in this house.
That is kind of cool.
It's kind of cool. I mean, it helps a lot if you're doing old buildings. You can walk in and I can just touch the walls and I see things that happen there. Unfortunately, a lot of times it's negative because negative energy is comes through easier than positive energy. So you see a lot of things you don't want to see. You see arguments, you see rapes, you see murders, you see a lot of bad things, but it gives you some history of what happened there. It's like the building, they absorb the building, especially if it's stone or wood, it absorbs all that energy anyway.
How long would that energy last in there?
I don't know, I wish I knew. I mean, it could stay there. It's just residual. So it could stay there potentially forever, I suppose, depending on what the material is, like limestone, a porous material. I think it can hold on to that energy for a long time, because who taps into it unless you can do what I can do and other people that have psychometry can do? Who's really going to tap into it? And a lot of the manifestations that people in these buildings experience, it's just residual anyway. They're not real ghosts. It's just residual energy. Just replaying itself over and over and over through time.
I've noticed that with a lot of battlefields and things like that. And
battlefields and old war hospitals.
Yeah.
But it can be something mundane as a man every day for 30 years got up, did the same ritual to get ready to go to work at the same time every day.
Yeah, I was with a team that I think was my first paranormal investigation. We got photographs of a guy pushing a little hand truck out of what's now an office in a restaurant. But back in the 1940s and 50s was a sheet metal plant, and he was pushing a little hand truck out.
Yeah,
it came around the corner towards the cameraman who was taking these pictures of the guy. And
it's probably just residual energy.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, kind of cool for me, because unless I'm touching something, I don't pick up on residual energy. I have to be physically touching the building or an object, then I'll pick up on the residual energy. But just to walk in a location and pick up on it, not usually. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. But, like when I was at Greenfield Village, I was hanging onto a door jamb. My hand was touching the building. And that's how I knew. Sometimes it's a picture. When I was in college, one of my college professors was a parapsychologist back before it was cool. It was in the 70s, 76, I think. And he was a psych professor, and he was a parapsychologist, and he'd come in on Mondays and tell us about his cases, if he had a case over the weekend. And it was fun to listen to. And one day he came in, he held up a picture of this house, and he said, I can't figure out this house. We were there this weekend, and all the energy of this house just came rushing at me. And I got up, and I wasn't even thinking. I got up and I took the picture from him, and I held it, and I told him who was murdered, how many suicides. I told him everything there was to know about that house. I cleared the room. And then I came out of it, and he just looked at me and he goes, you're going hunting with me. And that's how I got started.
Wow, that was in 76.
It was in 76. I just gave away my age, but whatever. Yeah, that was in 76. And I started. He wouldn't even tell me where we were going. He just picked me up and he'd take me to this location. I knew nothing about where it was or what had happened there or what was going on, because I didn't want to, because that corrupts any evidence.
I was talking to Barry Taff, who was a professor at UCLA back in the 70s, and he was teaching parapsychology back then.
That would be cool, though you couldn't get that in Michigan.
Well, actually, they shut him down there, too, once the Alumni Association said, hold on, we're paying so much for who's doing this? And they were doing remote viewing.
Oh, that's cool.
And they were actually teaching, plus, you got to remember, it was the, Vietnam War kind of mentality and anti-government stuff going on.
And all the time, the government is running secret projects using people that do what they do.
Yeah, and he was teaching, that was it U.S. Navy and the CIA remote viewing. They were experimenting in it and teaching, and they
there was a big project. The records were just released on that whole Stargate, I think they called it, on this whole big project where they were using that during wartime. They were using remote viewers.
Oh, it's amazing. Russia uses them. India have really good remote viewers. Canada uses them. The U.S. used them. They found a submarine that went missing. And then somebody, and this was the CIA, somebody got into the CIA to become head of the CIA, and I can't remember when this was, in the 80s or 90s, and very, very Christian gentleman, who heard about this remote viewing and said, we can't do that. That's the devil's work. And shut down the remote viewing program in the CIA.
Yeah, I believe it.
And it was just because he thought that was satanic.
Yeah, I mean, I still run into that, Oh, you're not really talking to a spirit. You're talking to Satan. No, really, I know the difference. Trust me.
Yeah.
Completely different energy.
So when your great grandmother comes through to say everything is going to be okay and she loves you, yeah, that's Satan. Because that's how they do it, right?
Yeah, right. It's what they do. Yeah, but what they don't understand is like the energy between a human spirit and an inhuman spirit, especially a negative one, two completely different feelings. Like I can pick it up a mile away. Like I can walk into anybody's house, and if there's a demonic or a negative entity there, I feel it instantly, and I know what we're dealing with. It's just a different energy. It's like if you take the energy of a normal spirit, it's like that on steroids. It's just this heavy, dark, oppressive energy that makes you physically nauseous. At least it does me.
Do you suffer from sleep paralysis?
No.
Did you ever as a kid?
No. The only time I experienced what they would call sleep paralysis was when I was under attack from the demon. Oh. And it only happened 3 times in my life. And that was the demon. And once we came to a detente agreement, it stopped. It hasn't happened since.
My last one that was in January 5th, 2017, I brought 3 dead people home for me from a very, very haunted location because my adrenaline had pumped. And they all just thought, oh, he's a policeman? We don't like policemen. We're going to come home with him.
Yeah, and we're going to play. And
the next night, and I'm really good at get rid of those things. I used Archangel Michael. I did I literally just imagine bringing white light in through the top of my head into my chest, forming a fist, and then going.
I use Michael too.
Out.
I use Michael too.
And you can actually hear them go as they come off you. But I imagine not being able to think the word Michael.
Yeah.
Your brain will not allow you to think that word. And I tried to get this thing off. I didn't know there was 3 of them. And we ended up the next day, we identified them, cleared them off, and crossed them all over.
Yeah.
But
it's scary.
At the time, it was very scary. And it actually growled in my left ear. And it was 20 minutes. This lasted 20 minutes. I looked at the clock, and it was 2 minutes to 4 in the morning, and ended at like 4:18. It was 20 minutes of me thinking, how do I get this off? I can't. I went through Michael. I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
And then I said, I'm going to go Ascended Masters on these guys' ass. And what should I do? Should I do Buddha? I'm just going to use Jesus. And as soon as I thought the word Jesus, my room went poof. Clear. Completely, like it had never been that clear in my life.
Yeah.
Nothing had been that clear. So the psychic comes the next day, later that morning, and says, oh, no, there's 3 of them. You brought them home from someplace. You did something that spiked your adrenaline. And it took me a long time to think of what I did, but identified it and the location, one of the most haunted places around here. And these guys are all turn of the century hooligans that didn't cross over because they thought they were going to go to hell. And then we talked them into leaving and saying, yeah, you're not going to hell. Don't worry about it. So off you go. So they all crossed over, but there was 3 of them pinning me down. And that was it. And it was freaky. And I've been finding from talking to people, the only people that have sleep paralysis are people who have a bit of a higher vibration to start with. And these dead human beings come in basically to get your adrenaline going to feed off of it.
Yeah.
And it growled in my ear, and the psychic says, "Yeah." And I said, "Was it a demon?" And she said, "No. If it was a demon, it would have laughed at you for trying to use Michael, as opposed to growling at you. It was just a human trying to be a jackass. Not that demons don't growl.
No, they do. They do.
Yeah. But this was just a human trying to be a tough. He was trying to scare you, and he said, "Oh, geez, it worked."
Yeah.
So,
yeah,
my heart was pumping.
It's scary. Like now, every once in a while, probably once or twice a month, like I'll feel someone like touching my shoulder and like shaking me awake. And I'll wake up. I'm like, why did I wake up? What the hell? And I look around. There's a spirit at the end of the bed. And they're like, excuse me, I didn't mean to wake you up. Yes, you did, or you wouldn't have done it.
Yes.
What can I help you with? You know, and a lot of times it's someone who's just just died. They don't know what to do, you know, or they have a problem or they have an issue. And, you know, I help them. And then it's like, okay, you need to go. I need to go back to sleep. I have to be up in an hour. Every once in a while I get one that says, yeah, well, I don't need to do that anymore. Yeah, well, good for you. I do. You know?
I found that, again, with the higher vibration people, it's they wake up between 3 and 4:30 in the morning. And it's usually because all day long they've got somebody poking them in the shoulder wanting some help. Like, hi, my name's Bob. Could you help me? You really glow nicely. I'm going to hang out with you. Could you? I want you to help.
And I have a lot of people that ask me, how do they know to come to you? And I always use the analogy, imagine it's a nice summer night, it's pitch black out, and you turn a light on your back porch, and every bug in 3 counties comes to that light. Yep. I'm the light.
Yeah, my oldest daughter's like that. She's a beam that comes, she's just a high through the roof empath. And not only attracting dead people, but everybody who's alive that has a problem in their life wants to come and dump their problem on her and share and ask for help when she's like 9 years old. Yeah,
it's because she's empathic, yeah.
Yeah, so she's just, you know, she's a poop magnet for that kind of thing. And which obviously in a post-pubescent teenage girl is going to cause a lot of anxiety on top of all the other natural anxiety. And it was pretty rough until a psychic friend of mine taught her how to block all her human friends coming to her and doing a little thing just before she slept and to keep the other things from waking her up in the middle of the night looking for help.
I mean, I have a few tricks for that, but you know, it doesn't really bother me anymore because it doesn't happen all the time. It's just every once in a while now, and I'm good with that. I can deal with that. Plus, the ones that wake me up really need help, you know, and I feel bad if I didn't help them. You know, I mean, I think like just to end everything on a happy note, I was in a cemetery, very haunted cemetery. I was there during the day. I was doing some genealogy research for the Historical Society. And this little old woman comes walking up to me, very nice, very put together. And she says, "Dear, can you help me?" And I said, "Sure, what did you need?" And she goes, "I need to know who has my brooch, my cameo brooch." I went, "Oh, okay, you're dead. Okay, got it." I'm like, "Oh, well, I don't know. Who are you?" And she goes, "Well, my name's Ruby." I'm like, "Okay, Ruby, show me where you're buried." Okay. And she shows me where she's buried. I said, "I know your daughter. I'm going to be at a meeting with her in a couple nights. I'll ask her. I'll come back. I'll let you know." So I went to the meeting. I saw her daughter. And I said, "So I'm just wondering, do you know who has your mom's cameo brooch?" And she goes, "I do." And I go, "Oh, okay, great." And I went to walk away. And she's like, "Oh, no. So I had to tell her, and she went back to the cemetery with me, and we sat on the ground at her mother's grave for 2 hours so they could have one last conversation. I translated for the mother because she couldn't hear her mother, so I told her what her mother was saying, and they got to have that conversation that they didn't get to have, and it makes everything I do rewarding. That was very rewarding. It makes it worth it.
And before I let you go, Debbie, got to ask you, what do you think happens to us after we die?
I don't know. You know, I think that when we leave our body, I think we see our body. And I think either someone comes and helps us or we go through a tunnel. Like with women, depending on what you believe. I mean, I personally believe that when a woman reaches a certain age, at the change of life, when she's older, she's assigned what is termed a watcher. And a watcher is a spirit, usually a male. You'll never see him. If you do see him, he's going to be in a robe with a hood over his head. You'll never see his face. And they are there to protect the woman until she dies. And when she dies, he takes her to the other side to meet her family. And I have seen my watcher because I'm an accident looking for a place to happen sometimes. And I have seen my watcher once, and I know he's there, and I feel safe when I know he's there. And that's what I think happens. You can take it or leave it. That's what I personally...
Oh, yeah. And next time you're out talking to a dead person that's crossed over and come back, that's a good sit down with them with a cup of tea and say, so what happened? What do you see? What did you have to learn?
Yeah, and a lot of them won't even talk about it.
The's rules. Yeah, you're not allowed to, like, I always joke around by saying you can't ask.
We can't tell you. It has to be a surprise. Well, I don't like surprises. Well, too bad. Suck it up.
We've got some information over the last few years of talking to psychics who communicate with dead people, and we've come up with this thing about the blue room, where you go to that and you're shown everything you've ever done that's caused somebody else a problem in your life. Everything.
Like judgment.
It's that web that goes out. And to leave that part of the blue room, you have to accept that, that was my responsibility. I bullied this kid in grade school, and then you have to feel how they felt when they were bullied. And then if they ended up bullying somebody as a result of you bullying them, you have to that web goes out. But then after that one, you go to the good side, and you get all the good stuff.
I could see that. That's why, like, now that I'm a little older, I own what I do. If I make a mistake or I hurt someone's feelings, I own it. Yes, that was my fault. I take responsibility for it. I apologize. Yeah. I do that. I do know that there's a room that it's not even a room. It's almost like an open air coliseum. That's all I can think about to describe it. Not even a coliseum. Like, it's like this old Roman or Greek building with the big pillars, and it's pitch black, and the pillars are pretty close together, and there's all these like little lights just flying around, and you can't get out of that space because there's guards, like big like giant Nephilim guards, and you can't get out of that space, and it doesn't matter. And I remember asking, I was traveling with a spirit, and I don't even know who it was. My guess is it was Michael, but I'm not sure. And I asked what the place was, and he said, this is where souls go to wait to be reincarnated. And I've never forgotten that. It was just pitch black. It was open air, and there were all these little, like, shooting stars everywhere. They were spirits, just little balls of light, just buzzing around everywhere, and you couldn't get out until you were supposed to come back.
When your new meat sack was ready.
When your new body was ready. Yeah, it's time.
Well, thanks, Debbie. That's a good place to leave this.
Thank you, James. I had a great time.
We've been talking to Debi Chestnut. She's an author. In fact, you can find her on author DebiChestnut.com. It's Debi, D-E-B-I, author DebiChestnut.com. Check out her books. The book we touched on today, which is funny because we bounced around on a few of her books, but the one we wanted to talk about and we did touch in a bit on was Is Your House Haunted? It's in its second edition. You can find that on her website at author DebiChestnut.com. Or heck, just Google author Debi Chestnut, and it'll take you to all her books on Amazon. Number of them that you'd probably be interested in. The other one we were touching on is How to Clear Your Home of Ghosts and Spirits. And we did touch on a very negative book. Oh, no, I shouldn't say a negative book, but she does have a book on demons and an incident she had in with that. Yeah, lots of stuff. We're going to have Debbie back. Aren't we, Debbie? We're going to have to get you back here kicking and screaming and touch on a few of the other subjects you've been writing about and that you've experienced.
Anytime. Just shoot me an email. I'll come on anytime you need me to. Watching you while you sleep all alone.
All right, that's it. Let's roll. And hey! Let's be careful out there.